Welcome to the Sip and Scale podcast, where we talk about everything business, entrepreneurship, and startups. My name is Blendi Muriqi. I'm the CEO and founder of Delegate.co. Each week, you'll join us as we talk with industry experts and business owners, sharing actionable insights to drive your business forward. So grab your favorite beverage and let's sip our way to success. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sip and Scale podcast. Today, we're excited to welcome Ryan Levy, co-founder and president of Fuze Technology, to the Sip and Scale podcast. Fuze is leading the way in IoT solutions, creating innovative hardware and software that seamlessly connects people and enhances everyday life. With products like ChargeFuse and AddFuse, they're driving engagement and making a real impact for businesses, events, and consumers. As a visionary leader, Ryan has been key in shaping Fuze's mission to build a more connected, tech-driven future. We're excited to dive into his journey, leadership insights, and the big things happening at Fuze. Let's dive in. Ryan, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. So let's start off about your roots. I know off camera we were talking a little bit about how you started, but for viewers that are not familiar with you, take us back to how Fuze started, the roots of your company.
It's a good question. I think like every great opportunity, sometimes you seek it out. And I definitely was seeking out an opportunity. I felt like I had the entrepreneurial bug for sure, but it also found me to a degree. So I was ready for it and I was ready to receive and embrace it. And ironically enough, when one door closes, another door or opportunity will knock, whether it's the hour later or maybe a year later. And so I was working in finance at the time, late 2018, where I received a phone call on a Monday, end of 2018. It was Monday, December 17th from Brandon, my co-founder and our CEO. And the rest is history. You know, I had gotten out of a long-term relationship the night before, and quite literally less than 12 hours later, without anybody knowing it, I received a call for the opportunity, and I looked at that as a sign. And, you know, we started to do our homework. And after Q1 2019, I left my job in banking, and we ideated, built, and scaled through much trial and tribulation with COVID. Thankfully, what is today, you know, Fuze Technology and our different offerings.
What were the early days like of Fuze? As entrepreneurs, when we're going through that ideation process and we come together, we first develop a product. Usually what we start off with and fast forward 5 years, what we end up with is completely different.
Oh, man. First of all, it's a great question and a really good point you made, which is probably 99% of the time, if not 100% of the time, a founder and a team's vision will have slightly differentiated or largely differentiated end result from where they started ideating and building. And that's just because you don't know what you don't know. And so as you uncover and as you start building, you realize things that you would never have realized had you not embarked on the process and the journey. And so to answer your question, high level, a lot of what we're doing today is a byproduct of what we first started ideating in, 2018. But the reality is, and I wonder if you can attest to this, we didn't know how we were going to get from point A to point B and then point B to point C, so on and so forth. But you put one foot in front of the other and you start building and figuring out things that need to happen or don't need to happen until you receive some type of MVP and then go to market. And then you listen to consumers and then you listen to enterprises and you see what's breaking from a technical standpoint. And to a degree, you learn and you evolve and you adapt as you grow.
Yeah, for lack of a better term, throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks in the beginning. Obviously, you need to make sure that you're doing it with forethought, especially in the beginning when you don't have operational debt, you don't have financial debt. It's a lot lower stakes. You can pivot very quickly. It's a lot harder to do down the road. If you can fail very quickly within a 1 month or 2 month period to try something out, whether it's approaching a new ICP, as long as you see traction, you go along that, and then you stay consistent for the long term.
And I think one kind of thing that nobody really equips you for are those early days where you have to be incredibly comfortable messing up and making mistakes. So as long as you learn from them and then adapt from your mistakes, as time goes on, you will always be at a net positive. And probably one of the hardest things I had to learn early on in my founder journey was that it's okay to make mistakes and that they're going to happen no matter how talented and smart you are. Even if you're a repeat founder, you will make mistakes, just hopefully not the same ones. Understanding key learnings from things that you do, I think, will help determine your success. But I think staying at an equilibrium and at a net neutral temperature emotionally is something that I have become accustomed to doing, where you acknowledge wins. I've said this a bunch of times, and this is something I live by, is, it's good to effectively remain even keel and to acknowledge your wins, to problem solve through your lows, but not to emotionally feel defeated and like the world is on fire when you have a problem, or to feel the opposite, effectively hubris, really excited and like you've made it when you have a big win, because it becomes very exhausting to ride this emotional roller coaster where quite literally one morning of one day, you could be having the best day ever and anything can happen and flip that sentiment on its ass later that evening. And so it becomes emotionally taxing if you're constantly feeling everything very deeply. And I was like that at the beginning and had to learn how to just embrace the wins, and the lows. And you will, I think, have a much more sustainable emotional journey.
Tell me a little bit about those wins and losses early on with Fuze. I mean, we all have our lows when it comes to starting a company.
Yeah, for us, I think, oh man, we really didn't know what we were getting into at the beginning. And I wouldn't, now looking back on it, I wouldn't trade or change anything about our journey. And if I had the chance to redo it again, 10 out of 10 times I would. So first of all, from just like a technical standpoint, SaaS is difficult and software in general is difficult. When you're, at the intersection of hardware and software, connected through IoT, it adds a whole nother element of complexity, just hardware in general. And because now you're problem solving and building two separate, not just bits, but also bits and atoms effectively. So understanding that hardware centric businesses that are tech enabled are difficult. Again, we would still do it again, but there was a lot of learning there that has led us to where we are today. And then the art of fundraising, right? And I use the word art sparingly or rather intentionally, because it really is an art. I think we've raised well into the 8 figures now, like close to mid 8 figures, and across several years, and with a lot of hard work and some really, really, really robust and meaningful and supportive investors. But early on, especially being a first-time founder, while I knew what it took to raise capital from pension funds, endowments, and institutions who were more on the public sector side with the work I was doing beforehand, I was never raising it from angels and people I knew and friends and family to start, and in my own network, right? It was always very transactional. But when you're a founder and you're raising your first money, it's very personal. And so it was different because I'm not one of those founders, and neither is Brandon, who can raise heaps of money and be completely okay with losing it. We don't like to have blood on our hands. And, you hear horror stories or success trials and tribulation stories of founders who sometimes raise $1 billion of equity, and in the process of doing so, sometimes more, sometimes less, take off tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars of secondary, and the company goes to zero, but the founder walked away like a bandit. I would never feel comfortable being a founder like that. And so for us, Brandon and I have never taken secondary off the table, and we're very married to a very meaningful outcome of our business for our cap table, for our team, and for everybody who's invested in us. Now, to go back to your question and hone in a little bit, and in brief, is the two big things at the beginning were understanding the complexities of hardware, software, IoT business. You have a logistical layer that goes into it. You have, for every software bug, you have, a hardware bug, and, there's different types of insurance you need when people are interacting with product, and just a whole, suite of things that were new to me and we had to figure out as we went.
You also have
very difficult.
You also have things on the outside that you can't control, like at events, for example. There's all
Correct.
these outside factors that have an effect on how your product is functioning.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember early on, we had a transient homeless person who we saw on security footage, and I'm not profiling. We know for a fact they were a transient. They were the local known, problematic homeless person in downtown Los Angeles when we first started. We would take any locations we could. And so like late 2019, early 2020, we didn't know what would work and what wouldn't from a KPI standpoint. And we just were spraying and praying to figure out what would work with us and what wouldn't in terms of like, consumer engagement with charge views and seeing how that would work. So we placed one of our mid-sized units in next to like the pay station at like a public parking lot. And the next day, like a week later, the station was gone one day, and we noticed on our back end it was offline. So when we sent one of our field service technicians to like troubleshoot the unit to get it back online, it wasn't there, and we were like, that doesn't really make sense. So we looked at security footage from the building. The whole unit, and this thing weighs 150 pounds. It's about 6'2" in height.
Yeah, I've seen
it's a tower, right? It's not the easiest thing to move. There was a transient homeless guy who came in the middle of the night, like saw the unit, saw it wasn't mounted into the floor in a public area, was like trying to like move it and lift it up, brought in one of the, last mile mobility scooter, like shared scooter that he brought off on the street corner, mounted this thing to the unit and effectively stole it. We found it, like security found it like 2 days later in the alleyway behind the building, stripped for parts. And, like this felt like such a big, like, this is one of those examples where if that happened today, we'd be like, let's just replace it and figure out how we can, what we got to do. It's not a big deal, right? Back then, when you have 25 units or charging stations in the market and in a very contained pilot, every single one is so meaningful to you. But also, like, if that's happening with one of 25, what happens when you have 250 and then 2,500 and then 25,000 units in the marketplace?
You think it's an existential issue.
Correct. And looking back on it, I mean, I remember we both felt slightly defeated. We're like, wow, we're just getting started. We're less than 30 days into this, and we're already having to deal with things like this that we never even really considered. It was not a microcosm of what would be. I think it was more so just a one-off example. The message in that was things you cannot forecast will happen, both good and bad, and you have to be able to just work through them. We laughed about it, and we do to this day. Sometimes we'll pull up the footage and we just, from 5 years ago, and we have a crack and a laugh. And it is what it is. Things will happen that are out of your control. You have to be okay with that and then just do your best through those processes.
And in the grand scheme of things, you realize that these things are not existential in nature. We'll go through situations like that. In the last few years since starting, did you guys ever have a moment where you're like, this isn't going to work? And talk me through that.
Did we? We've had a few. When we were first starting, we effectively launched January 1st, 2020, and then we relaunched September 1st, 2021. Obviously, that's almost a 2-year gap there. And that's because from mid-March of 2020 till like middle of 2021, we were dormant.
That was, I don't remember. There was like a bug going around.
There was something going on. Yeah, there was something going around. It's a generational global pandemic that locked down trade, commerce, human interaction, travel, leisure, and hopefully is not anything that any of us will ever have to experience again because it was awful. Anyhow, when COVID first started, we were actually a bit relieved, not to be dismissive of the magnitude of this global pandemic and this virus and the lives that were lost, but more so as like an early stage tech company that was launching as a January 1st, 2020 for the first time, and we were growing really quickly. There was a lot of key learnings from a tech stack standpoint that we needed to integrate into our product roadmap because of things that we were learning by being live in the market. Meaning, when this was first happening and we were told it would be 2 weeks to flatten the curve, we felt a little bit relieved because we were like, oh, great, like 2 to 3 weeks, let us catch our bearings, refine product on the hardware side, refine product on the software side, more importantly. And then when this like little mini pandemic thing is over for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, we'll hit the ground running again because we couldn't catch our breath during the first like effectively 3 months that we were live. Well, suffice to say, especially being in California, that 2 weeks to flatten the curve turned into like 14, 15, 16 months to flatten the curve. And so come New Year's time, January of 2021 now, almost 10 months into this thing, it felt like it was never ending. Brandon and I were defeated, deflated, and we're having conversations on a weekly basis for like a 3-month period from like Thanksgiving of 2020, where the second shutdown happened. They were just starting to kind of slightly open things up again in California, like October. And then November, like 6 weeks later around Thanksgiving, they did a full shutdown again. And so from like Thanksgiving time till like February of 2021, it was like, 2 full months, 2.5 months where every day was uncertain. I mean, at this point, we were coming up against the clock on our cash position because we were running really lean, but we had raised a really small angel round in 2019, and we were sustaining, and we were asking each other frequently every week, do we pull the plug and return our prorated cash position to our investors? Like, do we pull the, like, this feels never ending. Maybe this is a sign, but we couldn't get ourselves to do it. We were like, we need to be the ones who do this. If it's not us, someone will do it, and it has to be us. We even had conversations with our 3 biggest, angels from our friends and family round. We sat down with all of them, saying, "Hey, we don't know when this is going to end. Like, do you guys want we have 35% of the cash, left that we've raised. Do you guys want to take your prorated amount? We're going to reimburse everybody what we have left, and just out of good faith, be transparent with them that we don't know when this is going to end. We don't want to come to you once we've burned through everything because this is out of our control." And all of them said, no, like, you guys will make it work. If you need more money, you can go raise a bit more. Like, this isn't going to be forever. We believe in you guys. We believe in this industry and the product, and stick it through. And we're happy we did. We think that was a testament to the company, to the vision, to us as founders. And obviously, I thought through COVID we were dead. I thought we were done. I didn't think we were going to make it out. And, I guess everything happens for a reason.
I think in situations like that, what you need to also keep in mind is you had proof of concept. So, like in the early days, you were getting traction. I think that's also what keeps you going, because there's like
And
that
that's what made it so hard to walk too.
Yeah, because you know that if given the circumstance that you're in right now, there's this global pandemic. If we remove that, there's growth. So if we just hold on tight a little bit more until this goes away, we have an opportunity to be leaders in this space.
It's easy to lose sight of the light at the end of the tunnel when you're in the thick of it. 100% what you said is accurate, but it's hard to remind yourself of that because when you have no income, well, we weren't paying ourselves at that time, and then you start going into credit card debt to keep things going. It's like, at what point does this risk not become calculated anymore and just become irresponsible? But I think what made it so hard for us to pull the plug is we knew we had lightning in a bottle, and we knew that because we had seen a couple months of like really great product market fit, despite all the things that were wrong, we knew that there would be a world where we could take what we were doing and remove the pandemic and scale it, like you just said. So absolutely. And we're happy we did it. We're happy we stuck through it. And then I guess we've had so many moments where we're very grateful and gracious for on the other end of it, which I think you also asked. And so I guess like a big milestone, we've had many milestone moments. I think early days, like after that friends and family round and like, mid 2021, late 2021, when things started opening up again and we started kind of getting off on our feet again, we went and we raised a seed round. And I remember at that time, it's funny, I remember when we raised like a mid 6-figure angel round back in 2019, I would ask, like, how are we ever going to get to a place where we raise like low 7-figure, substantiated, robust seed round? And then came late June, July, August, I'd say July, August, September of 2021. And we went to market on a seed round to kind of give this another go again, because we had a couple contracts that we had closed in on. And we ended up, raising a few $1,000,000 at that time, which was like a big milestone for us. And then at that time, I remember thinking like, wow, we've done a seed round. Like, how are we ever going to get to being a Series A company with like traditional venture and lead investors? But I think for us, like another big milestone was a more recent one, which was a few months ago. We closed a Series A, which was a big milestone for us as a business, because the company for the first time was not raising on, notes. It was raising at a price valuation, and with that valuation was substantiated with follow on and new investors, from global institutions to local VCs to, personalities and athletes. And so those were all dreams of ours that one day we would have. And I think kind of taking a step back, because when we were in it, it wasn't even registering that it was happening. We were just like, this is what needs to happen. This is what's happening. Like, this is where we're at as a business. But sometimes you take you probably have experienced this, right, as well, Blendi, where you take a step back and you're like, wow, I only dreamt of 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago being where I am today. And now the goalpost keeps moving. So sometimes it's good to kind of, as you're on the journey and the ascent,
Ask yourself,
it's
where
good
were
to
you 5 years ago
correct,
and where you are right now?
correct. That's exactly it.
One question I have, and I'm sure viewers that they're early on, maybe they're in the ideation phase, maybe they're just starting their company in year one, and they have a good product, they have some proof of concept, but they have no idea what they're doing when it comes to raising money and what the separation of time means between as a founder and operator, between operating the company and continuously going out there building relationships with people so you can continue to feed the
The
animal
machine.
that is the
Yeah.
machine that is the
Yeah.
company. Talk me through that process and advice that you would give to young founders that are going through that same thing now that you've come out on the other side and you've had a few rounds of raises under your belt.
The truth is, it's daunting and it's intimidating, especially early on when any type of growth is predicated on raising, for the most part, on raising some type of capital to help substantiate early growth. And so I think looking back on it, the biggest things for me are to be okay getting rejected, especially early on when you don't have, brand name investors to substantiate what you're doing already. You don't have anything to substantiate it. So it's just a vision. Always investors are looking to the founder as much as they are product and vision and roadmap, I think, but never more so than at the early stage when you just have a vision and you don't have much to show for it. So I wouldn't say it becomes easier as time goes on. I just think the challenges shift. So like when you have product market fit and you have revenue and you have a team and you have upper management talent and you have, enterprise contracts, all things you hope to get towards, you can lean on those, but then the questions become different, right? So I think early on, you just have to put yourself out there. You have to know that for every yes, you'll probably get 10, 15, or 20 no's. Always trust your gut. That's not anything anybody ever told me, but I think sometimes it's easy to spend a lot of time and resources pursuing an investment, like an angel investment from whoever it may be. And for one reason or another, it doesn't transpire. Like, I think make decisions quickly early on. If somebody, you'll feel it. If somebody's real and sees the spark and the same shares the vision that you have, you'll know if like very quickly they're going to give you a commitment, whether it's 10 grand or 100 grand to partake and participate early on. So if somebody's kind of wasting your time for one reason or another, just don't spend too much time on it, because at that stage, you don't really have support either. It's maybe yourself, it's maybe you and a couple co-founders or another co-founder. And so you still are fully operating and doing all the BD and building and road mapping, all the things that go into like actually operating a business. And you don't really have support on that side apart from like I had Brandon and it was just us two early on, right? And fundraising can be a full-time job. And so ensuring that you're doing it as efficiently as possible is probably the best advice I can give. And just know that you're going to get rejected a lot, especially as a first-time founder. And that's okay. Like, you have to put yourself out there, but you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? So anyway, I think being okay with rejection, and the best feeling is when at a subsequent round, people who once rejected you invest in your business and say, I wish I wouldn't have passed at a previous time. Like that's like the most awesome full circle moment, right? It's kind of like I told you so. But use it to fuel you.
In the beginning, especially with your angel, you go through a friends and family round. Did you find it difficult to convince even, those around you? Because a lot of times it's obviously, if you have friends, family that they invest in you, they believe in you. What is that like, the difference between that angel round and then as you, or your friends and family round, and then as you go through, your Series A, for example, raising that? What's that difference like?
Well, I think from friends and family and personal relationships who you're raising to, or like introductions through personal relationships on a personal level, where the investment's coming directly from a family office or an individual or their personal LLC, it's very different than like raising from institutional, where it just the process is very different. Check sizes are very different.
Due
And usually the scope of
diligence.
business. Oh, everything. Right. Exactly. Due diligence is like the biggest one. From A to B, you become incredibly more confident because the implication of you being able to raise a Series A round and in being in the market for it is that you've raised before, at least a couple times probably. You've got product market fit. You have material revenue, you have growth. You have a team to support you on all the other things while you as a founder are focusing on fundraising. And so it just feels very differently. It's still high intensity and high stress, but for different reasons. Early on, I'd say we're very lucky to have a great network around us of people who believed in Brandon and I as co-founders. And they said, hey, like some of them said, we really believe in what you guys are building and think this could be huge, but we equally believe in you guys. And so we're in. Some of them said, we're not sure how big this could be, but we believe in you guys as an
Enough to
ability to
put in
execute.
this much money.
So we're going to write you a check, which, at that time and even now, every dollar is a blessing to receive from an investor. Like if somebody's even saying, hey, I'm only in this for $10,000, that is meaningful. We don't take any investment for granted.
Yeah, of course.
But especially back then when they were the first dollars in, right?
Yeah, it means a lot.
And I remember it does. It means a lot. And it still does. And we even had people back then who said to our face, good luck. I think there's no chance you guys make it, but I think you guys are smart and I like you on a personal level and you're very capable, but this isn't for me. And some of those people
feel now.
We've run into some of them and they've said, congrats guys, like you proved me wrong. And those are always nice, again, like small little milestone moments where people who were aggressively and vehemently against what we were doing as non-believers, can't be non-believers now because we're doing it and we're leading the industry.
That's awesome. You were touching upon, building out a team. What I'd love to hear is your philosophy when it comes to team building, what you have emphasized in your hiring practices as a founder and operator, and also how you've leveraged global talent within your company to take it to where it is today.
I think that's also a craft and a skill that you learn is the ability to manage, the ability to hire, the ability to hire right. We always look to foster a culture of innovation and agility here. We want a sense of empowerment within the people who we have on board, for them to have a sense of ownership, to be able to bring their own ideas and projects to the table, I think is how you get the most output for a business. And you get the team members feeling the most comfortable with experimenting and learning from failures, because we've been seeing failures since day one as founders. But when people are new to a business at this stage or anywhere between day one and today, they don't necessarily always feel comfortable making mistakes. And so ensuring that they also have that empowerment and support, knowing that like, hey, here are the mistakes we've learned from. These are mistakes we don't want to make again. But as you grow as a business, so do the challenges. And there are mistakes that like wouldn't even be applicable to day one founders. But as you've gone from a day one company to a 3-year company to a 5-year company, the challenges and scope of business change. And therefore the hurdles and obstacles that you have to overcome are different. And so I think just instilling that sense of empowerment in our team and getting people to really buy into what we're doing. Like we're very lucky to have some amazing talent who has joined us over the last few years, many, if not most of whom are still with us today. And these are team members who come from some of the most reputable companies out there, from Meta to autonomous robotics companies to Bird to Google and many more, and having the ability to sell these people on a vision and then have them make an impact towards reaching that vision, but also share the vision with you. It's not your vision, it's the shared vision, because people believe it equally, is a really hard thing to do that early on. I admittedly wasn't very good at. I think I had to learn how to cultivate that creativity with people and that shared collaborative approach where people felt like they could walk into my office or Brandon's office or whoever their direct report's office is and say, hey, here's what you suggested, but here's how I think we should be doing it, or how we could be doing it any differently, rather than just a bunch of yes people who say yes to everything and do it. And even if they don't agree with it, right? So like having a hands-on approach in a way where we actively are involved in product development and customer relationships to assure alignment, like between our company's goals and then what the market needs are, is also important. And look, I think something that really does help is when you reach a maturity level of having some of the really great and supportive investors that we have, is like oftentimes they help you with hiring, especially the really, really, really top tier, seasoned, smart, sophisticated talents who we want to bring on board. Like oftentimes they want to talk to some of our cap table and ask them what their conviction is and why they've invested us and continue to support us. And so whether that's Live Nation Entertainment, who's the biggest live events company in the world, they own Ticketmaster as well, to ASM Global, who just got acquired by Legends, who are the biggest arena and convention operator in the world, to Palm Tree Crew or Palm Tree Ventures, which is, Kygo's fund, to traditional venture like Bain and Science. We're very lucky to have these investors, to Simon Property Group, one of the biggest retail operators globally, right, in their venture arm. And so being able to lean into our cap table to help foster meaningful talent acquisition has also been really great. But earlier on, it was a lot of vision building and alignment on roadmap and letting people know they're going to make a big, they will get to see the fruits of their labor. And I think that's what excites really talented people, is the ability to see the output of their work.
You've had to, it's different selling to an investor, and in many ways the same, selling to investors trying to raise, but then selling to this top talent that you're trying to bring into the fold. What's that key sales pitch that you use when you're encountering that really high caliber talent acquisition?
I think there are many ways to skin the cat. I think one thing that we've become good at is learning how to effectively tailor a conversation, not just by virtue of questions asked, but also by answers provided to the specific person who you're talking to.
Yeah.
And
Because
so
everyone has their own needs, their own desires.
100%. And you have to be able to listen to what the needs of people are without them telling you, here are my needs. I think understanding how to read and effectively having a high level of EQ is, how to read a person by virtue of high EQ. It's something you can learn. There are a lot of things I'm not good at, but it's probably one of my strengths as a leader, is my ability to understand people. Doesn't mean I don't get things wrong, right? And misread things, but it's a muscle that you work on and you exercise. And I think for me, the ability to really know what's going to be important for somebody if they take the leap in joining us, and then ensuring that that's something that we can provide them so that we meet expectations and then exceed them once they've joined, right? Because you don't want to get into something with somebody and then have them be immediately unhappy because things aren't what they thought they would be. So I think we've done a really good job at like understanding how somebody is going to be a good fit for us. And Brandon's amazing at this, understanding how somebody and their strengths and their skill set are going to be able to actually make an impact so that we can help support them in what they do. And then culture is super important for us. So I think focusing on transparency and collaboration and customer, centric sort of leadership principles has put us all on the same page in that sense. And those are our North Stars, right? And things that everybody buys into.
Given that you've been going through this the last few years, there had to have been situations and learning lessons in hiring. I mean, we've all done this as founders where we've realized things about our company culture from the good people that we've brought in, but also, the mistakes we've made in hiring. What have you learned from the worst hires you've brought in versus the best? Because I always say this to other founders, and there are some that are like, yeah, no, it's been pretty good. Like I'm like, absolutely not. If you've went through this journey and it's your first startup, you've had bad hires.
I'll make it really simple for you. The first is no one will hire 100% correctly. No one. The best companies with the best vetting processes and I'd say the best EQ as it relates to understanding talent and hiring will maybe hire 75 to 80% correctly. That's the first thing. The second thing we tend to trend right around that threshold, right? That's the first thing. That's as it relates to kind of like, I think, the cross-industry standard for hiring is nobody's ever going to hire 100% correctly, including us. We've had a handful of people who, are no longer with us. We have a pretty high retention rate, which is great. And we've learned. So I think the biggest takeaway is adapt quickly, And, Brandon and I tend to be, pretty empathetic as individuals. And sometimes that can be your Achilles heel. And so when you bring somebody on who, maybe 6 months in or 3 months in isn't really meeting the expectations that you had, sometimes people stick around because of our bet on them and are giving them the benefit of the doubt longer than they probably should.
That level of
And that
empathy
can,
kicks in, and
correct. It's like, for different reasons, right? And then I'd say there's two different types of people who don't work out within a business. One are the people who are great, who really are passionate and who really care, but their output is not meeting the expectation you had for the role. And then there are people who, and this happens, we're humans, who let their personal life affect their professional life. And, sometimes those things happen and people stop showing up, people stop delivering. So to answer your question about the best hires versus effectively the worst ones, best, most impactful people always are the ones who carve out a role for themselves beyond the role you thought they would take on. And so they effectively make themselves irreplaceable. People who come in and are grabbing the opportunity by the horns, not just doing what you hired them to do, but going above and beyond, right? They are showing you the way you should be doing things, and you're hiring them for their expertise. And they make such an impact that it resonates to other people in the company.
Do you think that those are innate qualities that, like what you just talked about, that's an innate quality that a person has, or it's a consequence of the experience they've had at previous places they've worked at?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think some people just innately, it'll stem back to the days that they were in middle school and high school and university, where they just were always hard workers and always were passionate about what they were doing because they were curious. But I think when you get good at something, you learn to like it, even if you don't love it at the beginning. And I think you have to also learn to love something to get the best at it. So there's a little bit of a chicken and an egg there. But I also think that if you bring on people who are really passionate about their work, you're going to see them make meaningful impact, as opposed to people who are, clocking in, clocking out for a paycheck.
Well, I think on my end, what I've realized from the worst hires and the best hires is, to your point, when you have someone coming in and you look at them in the beginning when they first started, and years later, you can find specific examples of how they've shaped the growth of the company. And now when I look for new positions to hire for, especially leadership positions, I look to see how they've shaped early stage companies, because we're, for a lack of a better term, we're a startup. How have you shaped the future or the progress of another company that you were at? It's definitely something. It's a very difficult process to go by, but we as founders, it's necessary for us. I want to.
It's a really good perspective. I think being able to identify cornerstone pillar moments when you look back on 12, 24, 36 months of working alongside somebody, in terms of the tangible impact they've made.
Yeah. Yeah, and doing it in the hiring process, which is difficult when you're, in recruiting. It's like, tell me about how you were a part of this moment. It's difficult because everyone wants to kind of give you the very flowery response to it. But that's when you can go into details and question, okay, how did you go through this process? What were the difficulties you had to address? How were they addressed? If you're able to get into the nitty-gritty of how you made that progress, then it shows that they have the potential to allow
you can assess and analyze through experience, and you'll know, again, as it's a muscle that you exercise, but as you go through the motions over the years, typically you could sniff things out.
Yeah, definitely. Ryan, where's Fuze headed within the next 12 to 24 months in terms of where you guys are in your growth? You just raised another round. Tell me about the things that you're passionate about, that you're looking forward to.
Man, I love working alongside and innovating alongside not just my co-founder, Brandon, which is a privilege in and of itself, but so many of our team members. We have a handful of offices. We're north of 80 team members now. We are really privileged to be in this growth position that we're in. As you mentioned, we just raised our Series A, which is a traditional growth round for us. And so leaning into expansion, whether that be new verticals and new industries that we're targeting and doubling down on ones that are working, but also global growth. So we've launched outside of the US about a half dozen international markets with a half dozen in pipeline. And so constantly ensuring that we are scaling efficiently, scaling strategically, and scaling in a way that is allowing us to hit our growth metrics is going to be important, both in North America and beyond. So I'm really excited for this next chapter where we have new initiatives that are coming, to our distribution, to our business. We're innovating with a lot of our enterprise commercial partners, of whom we've got dozens, and many of whom have investment-wise supported and substantiated our business. And so we have the ability to innovate within that distribution, which is really unique. And I think just continuing to be better as a company, learning from mistakes that we make, implementing them into our go forward. And there's a really underlying exciting energy within the business that has been persisting for a couple of years now. It is continuing to compound. And so ensuring that we have fun throughout the process and leaning into that is what I'm most excited about.
Internationally, you said that you guys are expanding outside of the United States. Is there anything in particular you're excited about? Any new markets?
Well, all of them. I think if there becomes any reason to travel to any of the markets, whether it's EU, UK, Asia Pacific, as a byproduct of work, it's always nice. So getting to travel a little bit, which I do a lot of already for work, is something that's definitely a positive externality of growing effectively a global business. But it's a little daunting, right? I mean, we're exposed a bit now internationally, but when you first start to do it, there are a bunch of things that are different than how you're used to operating domestically here. So like figuring out all of those things for new markets and new regions as we go is a challenge, but one that we're up for.
Labor, different employment laws, taxes,
different insurance provisions, different import and provisions, different things as granular as like consumer facing UX in different languages and customer support. I mean, things that sometimes you undermine, but are real.
Wow. That's awesome. These are really fun challenges to have.
I agree. Wow. Sometimes it's like, you're like, shit, this is stressful when you're in it, but nothing unsurmountable. So we say, so we like to think.
Well, on a closing note, I'll just share a little story. I spoke to one of your colleagues, Alec, at a recent conference, the All In conference that we were at. My phone had died, or it was about to die, and I didn't realize at that time that Fuze had they had their hardware set up inside the tent, and another one of your team members was like, "Oh, dude, just throw your number in there and charge your phone." So because of that, I was able to record all these great moments from this conference and share it with my friends and share it with my family. And I was able to continue to stay in touch with my business and with my colleagues throughout the whole conference. So I want to thank you for starting this, because otherwise I would have probably had to ask some vendor, "Hey, you got a charger?"
Yeah, and you would have had to leave your phone there. So I want to thank you for the positive feedback and for the sentiment and for being a firsthand organic consumer. We as a team, we love that. We love seeing people organically interact with the product that we've brought to market and continue to scale. It's the best, testament to what we're doing. And you get jaded to it because you get to a point where you're processing millions of transactions. But with that said, I will be in the wild and I will see someone interact with our product and rent one of our ChargeFuse portable chargers and take it with them. And every once in a while, I'll have a pinch me like, wow, like I was a part of bringing this product to market. And it's it's always cool. We don't take those things for granted.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for joining the Sip and Scale podcast. It's been a pleasure. This definitely won't be the last time we have you on.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, Blendi, for having me. This has been, the time's flown by. It's been really, really great. And I look forward to hopefully reconnecting with you soon.
Yeah, definitely.
Congrats to everything you have going on and good luck and continued success, man.
Thank you so much, man. And thank you to our
Absolutely.
viewers for watching another episode of the Sip and Scale podcast. We'll see you next time.